Another thing you can also get are these clamps. I usually get 2 of these. You can get them really cheap at Home Depot. And how I use them is I'll put them on the back of the screen. And what that does is when I'm printing, the squeegee has something to lean against, so that when I lift up the screen, the squeegee doesn't fall off the back. So I'm going to go ahead and add my ink in. My first color is white, so I'm going to mix up my white ink. And on the first pass, I'm going to print my registration marks. And then I'll tape them off on the back, and I'll show how the 2-color registration will work. Alright, so to begin, I'll flood the artwork, and then I'll do my first pass. Lift up, and then I'll flood back. Now, I printed my registration marks on this first design, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape off on the back side of the screen the top and my bottom registration marks. So I only want them on one print. Now, if you're having problems with the poster sticking to the back of the screen, you can take a little bit of spray adhesive and just lightly spray the palette. Now I take my sheet and my tabs, I click those in. Nice even pressure. I flood back. I lift my screen up. I check that all the ink went down, everything looks good. Then I'll work on my next print. Click the tabs in for my registration. Smooth my paper out. Nice even pressure. Straight back. Flood the ink. Undo my plastic tabs, and then continue to print. As I print, I'm always adding new ink into my screen. So the more fresh ink you put onto your press, the less chance you have of it drying in the screen. So you always want fresh ink going in, so I put a little ink in at a time. Now after you finish printing, you want to work quickly so the ink doesn't dry in your screen. I remove my off contact on both sides. I grab my ink container and some spare cardboard, and I card out as much of that ink as possible and put it back into the container. And then I'll also take some of the ink off of my squeegee. once I have all the ink off my screen and the majority off of my squeegee, I'll then take it immediately over to the sink and wash all the ink out. Now, another method you can do for your registration if you don't want to buy the pins is you can just take some clear tracing paper or vellum, and I have two 11x17 sheets here, and I'm going to create, in essence, a film flap. So I don't have a big enough sheet of tracing paper, so I'm going to take two pieces of 11x17 vellum, and with just some Scotch tape, I'm going to tape them together so that, in essence, I have this one longer piece. All right, so I want to tape down my film flap so it doesn't move. So I'm going to take some of my blue painter's tape so it's easy to remove later on. And I tape down one edge. And the idea is that I can lift this up when I'm printing, and then when I put it down, I'll be able to see where my artwork is going. Now, I'm just going to take either a paint pen or a Sharpie, and then with my first layer of my artwork done and printed, all I'm going to do is just trace that layer. So I'm going to go in, and I don't need to trace everything, maybe just a few shapes. So I'll trace maybe the V and the O and maybe the T. And I'll just grab a few of these letters, here to trace. The idea and the concept of the film flap is that it's a window to when you have your screen registered, where you can lift up the film flap, take your first layer in your print. If you don't have those registration tabs, you can then move this around until you get your first layer aligned. Once you get everything aligned on your first layer, then you can take the film flap, move that back, and then go ahead and do your print. So this is a low budget way of doing some registration with just a film flap. All right, I just applied the second piece of vinyl artwork to the back of my screen from my gold stencil. I double checked to make sure there's no air bubbles or pockets. I used the squeegee to get all of that nice and smooth. And now the next step will be to take my screen and use the registration marks on my first print and register my artwork to that. All right, so what I'm trying to do is take the registration marks I have on my second color, and with my first test print, I have two registration marks in each corner. So I'm going to take the screen and lay it down, and I'm going to move the screen around, and I'll push down and I'll move the screen around until everything registers. Once I have it registered, I can tighten my screen down, and then I'm ready to print my next layer. Alright, so I'm ready to print my second color for my poster design. I'm doing gold. So I'm just mixing up the ink, getting everything ready. So I add in a little bit of ink. I can always add more, later as I'm printing. All right, so first pass, it's always good to flood. Nice even pressure. lift up, flood the ink back, and then check your registration. As I take my print with my tabs, I have my first color printed. I get everything locked into place. With this gold ink, to do a few passes to get it really opaque. I'm doing 3 passes of gold. Flood it back. Check my print. Everything looks pretty good. Check my registration. And then move on to the next print. Alright, so to repeat the process, I align my printing tabs. I drop my screen with this gold ink in a 225 mesh screen. I'm going to do 3 passes to really get a nice opaque. Then flood my ink back. Check and make sure everything is even. If it all looks good, then I'll take it off my registration tab. Move on to my next one. Align it with the registration. And nothing's going to move because of these tabs. This one I'll try 2 passes and see how that looks. That looks pretty good. So maybe in the future, instead of doing 3, I could do 2 passes. Last print. On my last print, I won't flood it. Alright, I'm done printing, so I'm going to clean all my ink up. Grab my gold. Card out the ink. Try and get as much out of the screen as possible. It'll just make it that much easier for you later on when you're washing everything out. Alright, so I'm off to the sink and I'm going to wash everything out.